Hey folks, in today's video we're going over Johan's replies to the 8th Tinto Talks on EU5, which was a further look into the economy of that game. And as always, we're just going to go through his replies, see what information is given. As with most weeks, he has given us information outside of the scope of the original dev diary, but we're just going to get straight into it. The first question here was, I wonder what trade will look like in EU5. I hope it will not be based on static trade directions. And Johan's reply simply that it won't be based on that. So it does sound like the trade routes aren't going to be static like they are in EU4, where the trade routes are always in the same locations and you can steer trade through them in different ways, but the actual lanes themselves are always in the exact same place. It does sound like now in EU5 that you are going to be able to alter those, or maybe they don't even start at the beginning. Maybe at the very beginning of the game, there's just trade between local nations as there would have been. And then once you discover the new world, once you discover the rest of the world, it is actually the ports, the ship technology, the islands, who controls those sea lanes that actually creates the trade routes. So they're not going to be those historical ones. Maybe they will be there, like the Silk Road, you know, the main trade routes through the Atlantic and the Pacific and things like that. But it does sound like potentially you don't start with those. And then once you naturally encounter the ability to trade further away, that is when these trade routes will like naturally grow. And then it'll be up to who controls those routes as to exactly how they kind of splinter off into all the different trade routes. I can imagine with the sea control system that they've talked about previously, there's going to be a lot of dynamism between how the trade routes are going to look on each campaign, but we will get some more information on trade in a couple of weeks, which Johan does mention later. Kind of similar to that, the next question by Stammy is, are markets static? Will Riga always be a market, or is there anything that could make this city lose its market status? Conversely, can other cities claim market status? More info on that in 2 to 3 weeks. As I just said, anything to do with trade and markets, we are going to get some information later, but he didn't say no here, so it does sound like you will be able to have these cities that kind of take over from other ones. Maybe you could potentially knock Venice out of power and have somewhere else close to it that takes over, or somewhere similar to that historically that had a lot of trade power. You can actually go in there and knock them out, and another city in a similar location around it, I would imagine, would then take over that trade power and get the benefits of having that. So again, coupled with the last one, looks like trade's going to be very interesting once we get more information on it. The next question, very simply, is the supply and demand economy real? Yes, it is. This is tied into the dev diary from Wednesday, where it did kind of hint at this. Well, it didn't even really hint at it. It was very strongly kind of shown to us that this was the case. And Johan again confirming that we will have supply and demand economy. This was probably tied to how stone was shown to work and how you needed to have like lumber to upgrade it and how all those systems kind of interconnect with each other. Next question, are banking countries one form of landless country that you previously mentioned? And Johan again saying yes. There is a question later on very similar to this, so we'll cover a little bit more about what that's going to mean when that question comes up. But again, confirming you are going to have landless countries, basically, like the banking system and other things that he's going to talk about, that will have no physical area on the map, but you can interact with them and can get involved in the politics and the world themselves. The next question about Gertanen, can one location have more than one raw material, or are they strictly one-to-one like in EU4? Each has one, but there are other ways for many of them. Bit of a cryptic answer. I'm guessing by this he means there's always only one raw material, but I wonder if he means like you could start with, say, stone, but then later on you discover coal and that replaces it. But that is very much how it worked in EU4, if I remember correctly. And he didn't confirm it was going to work exactly like it. So again, another system we're going to have to wait for a bit more information on. I wonder if it's just linked to some technology. It starts with one, but you can unlock it with like the Industrial Revolution, where you can work 2 raw materials on the same location or something. As always, we can speculate as much as we want, but we won't know until Johan tells us. And then this is the follow-up question to the one that came up earlier. Does that mean that these banking countries will be separate from sovereign states? That is, they will be diplomatically separate in some way, but geographically tied to another country, such as the Peruzes in Florence. Can we play them, or are they just interactable? We'll talk more about that in a much later dev diary. So yeah, kind of tricked you there. There wasn't really an answer this time around either. But it does sound like, as again, he didn't shoot it down, that we could potentially be able to play as these like amorphous states that aren't technically on the map, but you can get control over things. Again, interesting how that would play out. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. I can't really think about how that would work, but I'm sure there is some cool ways you could get a campaign going, kind of being the hand behind certain things, especially if you're the banker of Europe and you can decide who gets loans and all that kind of stuff. It could be pretty interesting to play that, I suppose. The next question is, so if a good required for construction of a building isn't present in the market the location belongs to, it won't progress until the goods appear? How is purchase priority handled within markets for locations, both your own and belonging to others competing for the same goods? Yes, you need them, else it will stall. So again, going back to the stone quarry example from the dev diary, if you didn't have lumber, you can't finish the mine expansion. So I guess it could be stuck at like 50 out of 100, and it just stays there until you get the other 50. And then the second part of the answer, purchase priorities based on market access at the location of the construction. So again, that's going to be one of the ways it does prioritize which buildings or construction is kind of prioritized, because you obviously could have like buildings, ships, you know, certain army units and things like that that need certain materials that all overlap, and which one actually gets prioritized. Or would you have to manually go in and kind of pause one, say yes to another? A little bit fiddly. It does sound like there is a automatic system, but you can go in and manually do it if you want to, obviously, by just changing what's happening. The next question, a very interesting one. What if you take a loan from another country and then conquer it? Does that cancel out the debts? Yes. So I guess if you buttered somebody up enough, took loads of loans from them, kind of pretending you were going to go attack somebody else, and then just like backstab them, take them out, you've kept their gold, and then you've taken them over. I guess in theory, when you took them over, would you have got the gold anyway? But I suppose you've made it so they didn't have the gold available to defend themselves better. But either way, a cool system. You could do that. You could just carry on going around, taking loads of money, turning on people, keeping the money and saying, thanks for your land and your gold. I'm winning now. Thank you very much. The next question, Avocado Grape. What a good username. I hope you can make subject countries the same color as your country, like in Vicky 3 or Stellaris. I don't want to have to annex my subjects in order to paint the map my color. And Johan with the awesome answer of, it's a game rule. As with a lot of Paradox games, the fact that they have so much stuff set into the game rules where you can customize how you want this to work or not. If you want it to be the same color, cool. If you want it to be different, you can also do that. So again, cool that it is a game rule and they've already thought about that. The next question by I Scream at Your Mum. Again, these usernames on the forums. For the materials in each location, how will the areas with historically large quantities work? For copper, for example, will there be a modifier for the storer copper barret? Definitely butchered that. It's probably not even French, is it? And was that even a French accent? It sounds like it's from Denmark, somewhere in Scandinavia. Somebody can laugh at my attempt and let me know exactly where it was in the comments down below. Or will they just start more developed, depending on if they were active during the start date? Like the meme goes, how about both by Johan? So you are going to have additional modifiers at the beginning of the game if you have somewhere that was just naturally more gifted with resources, but also certain areas that had a large quantity of a certain good. So think of like the Pennines in the UK with coal. They're going to actually have more coal there than somewhere that just had like a normal amount of coal, or like small coal deposits. You are going to have that benefit of having such a big wealth of coal in your area as an example of a good and how this could work. So again, that is pretty cool. Gives strategy on if you're running out of a certain material, you know your resources are going to be gone. You might have to go to war to gather some resources from somewhere else instead and take that land. There's a few nations that did that historically. None of them come to my mind at the moment, of course. The next question. In the image for food in Kalmar in the previous dev diary, the base production of food seems to be less than the peasants present are consuming. Is that intended? Yes, because as we remember, Kalmar was also building stone mines because stone is not ideal as a food source. If it had been fish, they would have produced more. So again, showing how these systems interact with each other. Yep, you can have those stone mines going up, but that means the population needs to be bigger to work those mines, but then there's less farmland there, or there is always less farmland there as an example. So you need to have other areas of your empire that are able to feed those locations that are giving you different resources. That kind of like internal supply and demand. I mean, it could be external as well, but for the most part, I think you're thinking of like, I've got a country where I need farmland to support my other endeavors. And that, again, is how it's going to work, as shown in this example. The next question, in terms of how subject nations are shown in the map again, will it look similar to CK3, where you have to click on the country to see its vassals, or EU4, where you can see all the nations and their vassals on the same map? And the answer, closer to EU4. So again, I wonder if it's like a game rule or something, where you can have it in both ways. Or maybe it's different map modes that show you the two kind of versions, and generally people are going to play in one map mode that would look more like EU4. I think that's probably what he's hinting at there. I think I prefer the EU4 way. It does kind of annoy me sometimes in CK3, having to click the right place to show who are the vassals, etc. underneath. In EU4, you can kind of just see it at a glance a lot easier, I think. As the person here, I think, was trying to call out in the question. The next one, Irishman845. If occupying a location has a granary during a war, can you loot the food stored in the granary, or does it just increase the supply limit of an area? We'll talk about logistics in a later dev diary. Again, just hinting at it, not shooting it down. I think it would be cool if it worked this way, if you could loot, you know, coal from certain places, other resources that you want to kind of like go in, smash and grab and leave with, rather than just destroying buildings, etc. in that area. You could actually like take the resources out that maybe are stockpiled, and then you kind of can use those in your own empire as like, you know, as I said, a smash and grab. I want to take some of this coal from England really quickly, go in, grab it, make peace, and then run off with your ill-gotten gains and put them to some use that you wanted to put them to, instead of doing trade or, you know, just asking nicely for it. Pretty cool system if it does work that way, but we don't know. But again, he didn't shoot it down, so it could work both ways, as he kind of thought about in a previous question as well. The next question from Lord Lambert. Who's he? I've never heard of that person. Guys, what if building ships required lumber? Yes, it will, which makes sense. I hadn't thought about it. There's a lot of these systems where I'm just so used to how it works in EU4 and previously in like Crusader Kings 2, where you just pay 20 gold or something and you get a good ship. Now it looks like you're going to have the lumber, maybe the cannons, etc. You're going to have the resources to actually build the ships for them to be built, which makes sense when you say it, but that isn't historically how these games work. But actually requiring that, again, kind of links in these systems in such a cool way. Your economy, your warfare. You can't be in these prolonged ocean fleet battles if you don't have a lot of lumber and you're losing ships. You're eventually going to run out of a navy. Their navy can then come in, blockade you, starve your nation, or basically just mess you up a lot as they'll have control of the seas. And again, really cool to see that is how it's going to work in this game. The next question, a very quick one. Are there straight crossings in this game? Yes, there is. I think it was pretty obvious we would get these, but again, nice for Johan to confirm it. If you're not sure what this means, think of, again, if you play Crusader Kings, you can go from Ulster in Ireland up to Scotland. There's a little strait there, a little crossing, where you don't need ships to make that short kind of crossing there. Think of it as well, Sicily to Italy, Gibraltar down to Africa. These little places where it wouldn't make sense for you to have to put a fleet together, put some ships in there, cross over, etc. I know historically you obviously would have had to have ships. You can't just walk across the Irish Sea. But I also think that it would be so annoying to play in those areas of the game if this system didn't exist. You would just be stuck on island till you could build a fleet big enough to cross to Scotland. I think it's better working this way. Let me know in the comments if you think it shouldn't work this way. Or again, maybe if it was a game rule, you could turn them off. I'm sure there'd be a mod at some point where you could just turn them off so they don't exist. But I don't know. I think having them there just makes it a little bit more playability. I know it takes away some of the like historical accuracy, I guess, but I think it is a lot better working this way, personally. The next question, I don't know if this person watched my video, definitely didn't because this was posted before my video went live, but I theorized the exact same question. Will the banks communicate, i.e. if I don't pay off one bank loan, will they tell the other ones not to give me loans? Also, Johan's reply, again a non-answer, as many of his replies usually are, an aggressive expansion for bank behavior. Sticky out tongue emoji. I actually think this would be a good mechanic. I don't know if he's joking and like, that's dumb, I don't think we'll do that. Or he's kind of saying like, yeah, that would be kind of interesting. Could go both ways. I actually do like the system, as I said in the last video. I think they should tell the other banks like, look, I lent them money, never paid it back, never gave me interest or anything. You can loan to them, but be aware of that. And then they would maybe like double their interest they charge or something, because the risk is there. I think that would be a lot better than they just say, I'm not going to lend you any more money, but then bank number 2 over there, they just go, yeah, I'll just give you it, same as that guy did, because we don't talk to each other. I think it would work a lot better this way, but we'll see, obviously, in the future. Biradas then asked, will we be able to pay a loan back earlier than expected if we have the money, and will we still need to pay the total interest as in EU4 or less? Yes, and yes, full interest. So you can pay back early, but you do pay the full interest. You could argue, I guess, that you could get a reduction in the interest if you pay it back early. That would make sense, but I think it's just so much kind of computation for the game to figure out how much it should be, etc. I think it is just a lot easier in many ways for you just to be like, yep, you can pay it back, but you're paying the same amount back, but you could just decide to do that if you want to. which I think is a fair enough deal in itself. The next question, are there any implications for low control on warfare? Yes. The cost of taking something in peace scales with their control. I think this was mentioned in an earlier dev diary, but I can't remember exactly if it was, or maybe I've just dreamed that. But this makes sense with how the control system works in EU5. If you have land very, very far away from you, you have like 5% control over it because your kind of sphere of influence doesn't really stretch that far. It makes sense that if somebody's trying to bring you to the peace table, they can say like, look, all that land that you don't control that well, we're taking all of that, and there's nothing you can really do about it because you don't really have control over it. Yes, you say you own it, but do you really own it that much? So we're going to take that, and that's going to be cheaper than taking land that's in your core realm. And again, I think that just makes sense and is a cool way for it to work. And then Vasto Lords, basically his question was, are we going to have a version of like the little ice ages that were historically seen at this time, or some kind of weather system that actually takes effect on how things work? And then Johan's reply is simply that he has an entire Tinto Talks schedule that is called Winter. So you could say, if you thought about it, that winter is coming. Anyway, having it affect things on the map, I think makes sense, especially as we've talked about how the other kind of good systems are so interconnected into everything else. It does make sense that if there was a prolonged kind of extended season of exceptionally bad winters, that it would affect things like food production, your army, maybe even like some sea crossings could become extremely slow. Maybe kind of like ice kind of appears on the map in the very north and south and things like that. That would be awesome. I can't imagine we would actually get that with the ice kind of on the map. Think of certain areas of the map that got exceptionally cold and like the inner seas and places actually freeze up a bit and kind of restrict movement and trade in those areas. I think that would be pretty cool. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. On to the next question anyway. If you have wood shortages, but you have one building and one ship in a queue, which one will the game prioritize? We kind of covered this a little bit earlier. Will you manually select, or is it the one that requires less wood, or the one that was clicked on earlier? It's the location with the highest market access first, and in those, military will always take priority over civil constructions. I would be amazed if you couldn't change that though, and maybe flip it over so civil constructions took priority. I'd be amazed if that wasn't an option somewhere that you could change that, but it makes sense this way, as we talked about previously. And then on to the last question. If the good isn't present, can you buy it from somewhere or someone? If I have 1,000 gold and no stone, and a building costs 100 gold and 100 stone, can I build a church at the cost of 100 gold plus 100 times however much the stone would be? If you can import materials, is there a viable way to build things, or is the cost so high that you will almost always want a domestic source? We'll talk about trade in 2 weeks, so no answer to this. I think it's probably going to work the way they say, where you can import it, or maybe there'll be like a toggle when you're purchasing, and you could choose, you know, pay the gold and I'll bring the resources, or a second option where it's like build and import the resources, and you'll just pay an exorbitant amount of money to kind of import them, not like immediately, but however the trade system works, you'll be able to do that option, because it must work this way, I think, because otherwise it doesn't really make sense, or it would be kind of annoying if you had something that did require 100 gold and 100 stone, and you had 50 stone. You wouldn't always want to just import the other 50. Maybe you'd want to say, like, I'm building that church, I'm getting like 5 stone a month, say, I'll build it, and then just keep topping up the extra 50 with the stone as it comes in each month, and then when it obviously gets fully resourced, it will finish. I think it must work that way, and then a way to kind of speed it by importing. But again, we'll see in 2 weeks by the sounds of it, so we'll get a lot more information there. And that brings us to the end of the Johan's replies to Tinto Talks 8. A pretty long video as always with these, but you folks seem to enjoy them. Let me know what you think in the comments down below, the answers you've seen, the information that we've got. Next week, as we know, we're going to be covering buildings and how they're going to operate and how they're going to kind of be built, etc. So that'll be interesting again for the actual diary itself, and then Johan's replies. So as always, hit that like button if you've enjoyed it. Subscribe if you're new here. I'm covering EU5 through announcement and launch and beyond. And I also cover Crusader Kings and other historical strategy games on the channel. But we'll leave it there, and I'll see you in the next one.